For anyone playing Destiny right now, you would know that we're currently in a mini content drop called the Rite of the Nine. It's kind of like a bridge between the ending of the Year of the Final Shape and the next major expansion, the Edge of Fate. Rite of the Nine has brought a number of things to the game. The most standout feature is the Ultimatum mode for a handful of dungeons, as well as a number of reprised weapons from those same dungeons. Overall, the Destiny community seems very happy with Rite of the Nine, but something got me thinking. Last year around the same time, Bungie launched the Into the Light update. That was also a bridge into the next expansion as well as a major content drop. Since both updates have tried to achieve a similar goal, I wanted to take a look at both to see how good each update was, how it affects the greater Destiny community, and how well they stack up against each other when compared head to head. Hey everyone, I'm Rizeki and welcome to my analysis of the Rite of the Nine and Into the Light in Destiny 2. As always, thanks so much for checking out the video. We are getting so close to 5,000 subscribers, so if you're not already, make sure to hit that sub button to be notified about future uploads. And also, don't forget to check out longtime channel partner Advanced with the link in the video description. They have great drink supplements for your gaming sessions, all the flavors are fantastic, and of course, you could grab the Rizeki Ice Shaker while supplies last. If you do check out Advanced, use the code Rizeki at checkout for a discount. It helps out the channel and you get some pretty great products in return. I think the best way to start is to talk about the current Rite of the Nine update and go over everything we have with it. The main draw of Rite of the Nine is definitely the updated dungeons. 3 classic dungeons are available to play on a rotating basis, with each dungeon getting a number of updates and improvements. Each dungeon was given a number of mechanical changes as well as 3 difficulty options to choose from. The mechanical changes to each dungeon are simple, but add an additional layer to each encounter. The core of each encounter has remained the same, so those already familiar with the dungeons will not be thrown into an entirely new experience. For Spire of the Watcher, the Arc Conductor nodes must be completed in a very specific order for certain encounters, while others might have an additional boss to fight. Although these changes are simple, like I said, the real beauty of these being added are when combined with the new difficulty options. Each dungeon now has 3 options of difficulty: Explorer, Eternity, and Ultimatum. Eternity mode is the most straightforward. It is pretty much the equivalent to the regular normal difficulty you would play in the original versions of each dungeon. Explorer mode and Ultimatum are a bit different. Starting with Explorer mode, this is where brand new players or those not used to playing dungeons should definitely start. Explorer mode is not only an easier difficulty than Eternity mode, but it adds something Bungie has never done before. This mode gives tips and guidance to players who are unfamiliar with the mechanics in the dungeon. For Spire of the Watcher, this can include showing players what nodes to shoot in the opening encounter, while in Ghost of the Deep, it could include showing which statue to dunk in depending on the current Hive rune. Explorer mode is an excellent, stress-free environment to learn mechanics for those who have never ventured into a dungeon before. And especially with the new mechanics added with Rite of the Nine, Explorer mode could help less experienced players wrap their heads around everything to find in the dungeon. Now, Ultimatum mode is pretty much the polar opposite. In Ultimatum, you are fighting enemies on par with Contest mode. Not only that, but you are also fighting for ranked tiers based on the number of deaths your team experiences. Your rank not only determines the number of rewards you obtain, but also the event title is locked behind gold rank on each boss encounter. When combined with the brand new mechanics for each dungeon, Ultimatum mode successfully emulates the feeling of a contest mode, even if the dungeons have since been solved. You have to figure out the new mechanics and stay alive to succeed in Ultimatum mode. It's a very clever solution to give dungeons that have never had a contest mode a kind of pseudo-contest mode of sorts. In addition to the dungeons, Rite of Nine also reprised a number of weapons previously available in these dungeons. There are definitely a number of dungeon weapons that have become obsolete over the years, or even some that are still good but are competing with slightly better options. This reprisal gives a number of weapons access to modern perks, breathing fresh life into them and making some of them very viable in today's sandbox. But that's not all. These weapons have 2 additional variations that make them worth chasing. Adept versions of these weapons are available for those who can succeed in the Ultimatum difficulty. And even harder to come by are the hollow foil variants of the weapons, kind of like the shiny weapons found in the Dreadnought and from the Into the Light update, which we'll be covering soon. Everything we received during Rite of the Nine was a win. The dungeons are a fantastic revitalization of past content. Ultimatum mode is perfect for endgame players looking for additional challenge in their dungeon crawling, and Explorer mode is perfect for introducing new or less experienced players into the endgame content. The weapons, with the inclusion of depths and holofoils, is a solid reward for completing dungeon activities during the event. But with all that said, how does it compare to last year's Into the Light? Into the Light was a very similar type of update to Rite of the Nine. It came as the bridge between the end of Season of the Wish and the start of the final shape, and the amount of content during Into the Light was impressive. Similar to Ultimatum mode, we had the Pantheon. Similar to reprised dungeon weapons, we had the Brave Arsenal. But there were even a couple more additions as well, including Onslaught and the reprisal of the classic exotic missions, the Whisper and 0 Hour. So let's talk about everything individually and compare it to Rite of the Nine. Starting off, we of course need to talk about the activities. Rite of the Nine has a single activity with 3 difficulties, aka the Dungeon Rotator, while the closest comparison inside Into the Light is the Pantheon. Pantheon is probably most similar to Ultimatum mode. Pantheon was essentially a raid boss rush mode with escalating difficulty each week, in addition to more encounters being tacked on to the end of the boss rush during every week. Similar to Rite of the Nine, the chosen encounters received some slight mechanical changes and had a reward tier system. The mechanical changes were not enough to really change how the encounters played out, but were mostly there to provide an additional challenge. In the case of a boss like Riven, they gave her additional damage resistance prior to the main DPS phase to mitigate the ability to cheese the encounter, for example. Rewards for Pantheon were adept versions of the raid weapons with no new perks. Pantheon was specifically made for that endgame player and the achievement hunter, as opposed to the dungeons from Rite of the Nine, which have selectable difficulties instead. Other than Pantheon, Into the Light also had many more activities to participate in. The exotic missions and Onslaught were fantastic additions during that update. Onslaught quickly became a fan favorite and was the primary source for farming the Brave Arsenal. Rite of the Nine lags behind Into the Light in this department since there is really only a single activity available, the dungeons. It's not too much of an issue, but Into the Light, I think, takes the prize for the better available activities. Maybe a way to shore up the difference would have been to include a couple more dungeons inside the rotation for Rite of the Nine. The difficulty selection makes dungeons much more approachable to all players when compared to the Pantheon, so activities like Onslaught aren't as required to give all players the chance to participate in the event. I think adding a couple more dungeons would have been a great way to stretch out the novelty of the event while also giving players more activities to engage with. The other major category to compare is loot and rewards. We already went over the Rite of the Nine rewards, so let's talk Into the Light. The Brave Arsenal was the loot you were hunting for during Into the Light. Each weapon in the Brave Arsenal is a classic weapon from Destiny's history, from the Mountaintop to the Recluse to even old raid weapons like Midnight Coup. The Brave versions of these weapons were strong. Mountaintop is still relevant a year later, and pretty much every other available weapon has some use in PvE or PvP. Elsie's rifle was a PvP monster, and Midnight Coup is an excellent kinetic hand cannon for PvE. Edge Transit was the boss DPS meta for a long time, and even Falling Guillotine was used for its access to Eager Edge. On top of the relevance of each Brave weapon, you could also find shiny versions of them with additional perks and a limited time ornament. I think the Brave Arsenal also wins out over Rite of the Nine in this department. The first, but also least impactful reason is the level of weapon nostalgia. Brave weapons are well-known weapons from the history of the game. Some were popular, some were infamous, and some were just good. Dungeon weapons, especially those from the chosen dungeons in Rite of the Nine, were really not that well known. Maybe Wilder Flight and Cold Comfort were fairly well known due to their DPS relevance, but otherwise the weapons were not popular or well known for the most part. The way more impactful reason is due to the weapons themselves. The Rite of the Nine weapons are not nearly as strong as the Brave weapons. Yes, the dungeon weapons receive perk upgrades and a brand new origin trait, but for the most part these weapons are still going to be just as useful as their original versions, maybe up or down a tier. Most players are putting the Rite of the Nine weapons mid-tier at best. Cold Comfort may be the only weapon that is truly worth chasing, but the original version is already good. And to be honest, the original and reprised versions are similar enough that you may not even need to farm a new one if you already have a god roll of the original. To sum all that up, the Brave Arsenal and Into the Light beat out Rite of the Nine and the Dungeon Weapon Reprisal for the looting experience. So with all that said, is Rite of the Nine worse than Into the Light? I think the simple answer is yes, but that doesn't make Rite of the Nine bad. Into the Light was an amazing content drop with a ton of activities, challenges, and rewards. but I think a direct comparison like we did doesn't necessarily do Rite of the Nine justice. Rite of the Nine in a vacuum is a great content bundle. The dungeons, Explorer, and Ultimatum mode, and the rewards are still solid. I've been having a great time playing through Ultimatum mode with friends and getting a chance at those holofoil adept weapons. I think the other massive consideration is the timing of these updates. Into the Light was not only a bridge to the final shape, but it was also released during the delay for that expansion. Players were absolutely sick of playing Season of the Wish, and player numbers were honestly pretty low. Into the Light was a way for Bungie to revitalize the community and bring us something fresh during what should have been an absolute content drought. After the long months of no new content, it was nice to get something fun and exciting, and the amount of content was proportional to the time without it. Rite of the Nine, on the other hand, was released pretty much immediately following the conclusion of episode Heresy, so there is still a lot of content from the episodes that is still fresh enough to continue to engage players. I definitely feel like it's enough content to carry us to the next expansion, while not needing to be too much more than that. And given the quality of the content in Rite of the Nine, I think that's okay. Now, I would have loved to see a bit more, especially with the dungeons originally being on a 3-week rotation. They could have definitely added something like Pit of Heresy or Duality to maybe make the rotation faster. But overall, I'm happy with the result of Rite of the Nine, and I'm looking forward to trying out the remainder of the dungeons as they release. But what do you think? Do you like Rite of the Nine? How do you think it compares to Into the Light? Should there be more content, or is it just the right amount? Let me know your thoughts below in the comment section. And if you enjoyed the video, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave a like. It helps me out, and it keeps you guys updated on my future uploads. But I think that's all I've got for now. As always, I've been Rizeki, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.